If this is off, if it's too high or too low, then all of the jet circuits are going to be off for their jetting. That means that if you're trying to dial in your pilot jet or your main jet, you may never get it right because the float level is off. And usually it's a set it and forget it when adjusting the float, but occasionally it can go out of adjustment, whether it's from the factory, whether it's from so many hours on the carb, or it can get bumped out of place when like you're rebuilding the carb and putting the float bowl back on. So in this video I'm going to show you how to measure the float height and how to get the proper float height, and the number one mistake that is super easy to make when measuring it that can get you the wrong measurement. This can be done while on the bike, but it's so much easier to do it when off the bike. The big mistake that I've made is when you're checking the float height and doing a measurement is just to have it upside down like this. So this is right side up, you're just flipping it upside down, and you're supposed to measure from the top of this surface or this mating surface to the top of the float here, when in reality it's the bottom. But the problem with that, when it's completely upside down, this can put too much weight on the float needle so that you're getting an inaccurate measurement. For example, the float height might be right here when it stops allowing fuel in, but if you let it go, drop all the way down, it's actually way too high. So how do you overcome this? Well, there's two ways. You can either start like this, have it at 90 degrees like this, and then slowly rotate it until you get to roughly 45 degrees. And once you see this tab on the float pushing against the float needle, that is when the float is pushing the needle into the seat and stopping the fuel, which is where you should check the float height. In most carbs, you can see this line here on the float. Usually the proper measurement is when the float is parallel to the surface of the carb, but I like to check the manual to get the proper measurement just in case. And for this 06 YZ450F, the float height or float level should be 8 millimeters, which is 0.315, so 315 thousandths of an inch. So you can take a caliper or a steel rule and you can get it, and right now I'm reading just over 450 thousandths. So that is definitely too low. That fuel level, this is going to be way too low, so all of the jet circuits are going to be running way too lean. So to adjust it, we need to bend this tab carefully on the float. You can do it while it's in there, but I'm just going to pull it out. Helps to have something small to push this dowel pin out. So if the float is too low like this, we need to bring it down. We're going to want to bend this tab up this way. You can bend it with your fingers. It really doesn't take much, so you might have to do it a few times to test how much pressure you need to push to know how far to go. So let's put it back in there, see if it made a difference. Alright, let's check the measurement again. And it looks like it's better, but still probably not perfect. So I'm getting just under 400 thousandths, so we're like halfway there. $350 thousandths-ish, so a tiny bit more. It's hard to get the right angle with the camera. In fact, it might even be a little bit high now. So I'm just going to push it back down a little bit. To me, that's just over 300 thousandths, so we're going to call that good. As you can see, you can measure and adjust the float height with the carb on the bike, kind of. So essentially, you just hook the gas line up to the carb here, you turn it on, and you just push up on the float until the gas stops flowing, and that is where your float height is. And if it's above parallel, so the float is angled up, that means the float height is too high and it's going to go out the overflow. So then you want to lower it by pushing up on that float tab. Or if it's too low, then you're going to want to bend it down so that the float goes higher. Now once you got the float level adjusted, it's time to fine-tune the fuel screw or air screw, depending on if you have 2-stroke or 4-stroke, because that is what controls the pilot jet, which is your idle to roughly quarter turn throttle response, which is where most of us casual trail riders ride. And if you want to learn how to do that in just a few minutes, I got a free PDF guide. It's super simple. It's basically just bullet point steps so that you can dial in your air fuel screw even if you don't have any experience. The link is in the description below. I'm Kelly Fagan from MXHideout. Ride safe. Have fun.